Thank you to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today, as you can tell from the title of the video, we are going to be going over at least how I like to color eyes for a lot of like my digital drawings. Before we get started with the actual kind of like demonstration portion, I did kind of like realize, at least last year especially, because I did a lot of like VTuber fan art. I still do fan art of like both, I guess, like of Genshin and Honkai Star Rail, so like any of the Hoyoverse kind of characters, and a lot of characters have very unique eyes lately. So let me show you guys some examples right here. So we go to my Genshin folder. I guess more recently you guys would have seen this piece potentially, and I feel like for at least Nouvelette, he is a character that I find very hard to draw his eyes a little bit properly, and I'll get into that in a bit. This is another one that I find a little bit difficult, and there is kind of like an underlying reason why, because I do have like a very standard way of drawing eyes. So here's Zhongli. When I was drawing like By the Beat, they all have very prominent eye colors alongside with like their pupils' styles. So Frio kind of has like I feel like it's more like a lock on, what is it called? Like a radical kind of look to his eyes in a sense. So we have Frio, and he has like a gradation in his eyes. Sable, so like his pupils is not like the standard circle or oval shape. It has more of like the little sparkle shape. Zeal, I feel like he doesn't have like a prominent highlight, which is why I opted to go for more of like a lower one, which like I mentioned, I'm gonna kind of like talk about that in a little bit. And then obviously Calyx has a very pretty kind of like gradation from almost like a blue to a green to a yellow in his eye color. So let's go ahead and start up a new canvas. Now I'm gonna use my OCs kind of like as an example to show you guys how exactly I like to color. Now for me, coloring and drawing of the eyes does kind of go hand in hand, just because of my process, but you can definitely like tailor it a little bit more towards how you like to work. So let's start off with my OC Maseki. So I'm gonna stick him in the upper left-hand corner for us just to look at. So he has very much just mid-tone, kind of warmish green eyes for his eye color. Now, I don't know how big I want to go. No, it's gonna feel a little weird drawing the eyes without like some sort of face. I might speed up this portion so you guys don't have to watch it, because I'm basically just sketching out his eye shape. We're going to put in his iris as well, which I make fairly round for the most part. So let's say this is our standard eye shape for Maseki. And the reason why I kind of loop in drawing and coloring together very similar is because I do end up merging my layers, but I do like planning out the eyes as much as I can. I almost never sketch eyes completely blank because I like to know which way kind of like the eyes are facing or if they look aligned. So I do like dropping in a highlight if I know where the light source is, or I'll just place it in and we can change it later. And I like placing the pupil so it doesn't look like my character is like super bug-eyed. So more recently, I've been placing the highlight more towards the upper center. I think in the past I would always drop it in the upper left hand and do the pupil right in the center like this. But for now, let's drop in our pupil. So Maseki just has a standard normal circular kind of just pupil like this. And then I'm gonna drop a highlight at the very center because this is what I've been liking more recently. And then the thing that I like to do is kind of separate a dark area, a extra highlight at the top, and then kind of scribble my way downwards. And this is what I find it's a little bit more applicable if you like doing traditional art, because I do this as well when I'm sketching. So what I'm gonna do is kind of like take where my highlight is, and I'm gonna darken, kind of following the shape of the eyes. And I will talk a little bit about stylizing this a little bit more depending on what the character looks like. Sometimes I don't drop the highlight, sometimes I will do this as well. But you can color the entire top portion and then put a highlight later by dropping in just by erasing. So because of how I like to work, I'm kind of giving myself a little bit of a guide on how I want to potentially paint this later. So this is kind of how my eyes look at this point. I'm gonna copy and paste it over, and luckily because the highlight and the pupil are both centered pretty much, it shouldn't look too off by duplicating it. I'm also gonna grab a new layer underneath my sketch. I'm gonna use the rectangle fill tool, and we're just gonna fill in a portion. Actually, before we get to coloring Masaki's eyes, let's take a little snack break with TokyoTreat and Sakuraco. Time to experience limited edition and seasonal snacks from Japan from the comfort of your own home with these lovely monthly snack boxes. TokyoTreat is a fun and exclusive monthly snack box that is packed with some of Japan's coolest and funnest treats. Each month, you'll get a Japan exclusive premium snack, a limited edition chip, and noodles. They always have a fun variety of snacks ranging from sweet to salty, even to savory, and since it is the new year, it would be the perfect time to try out a whole new snack selection. While Sakuraco is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local snack makers across Japan, each box is carefully crafted with traditional and seasonal snacks that are hard to come by outside of Japan, like mochi, dorayaki, senbeis, and even more, including a signature Japanese tea and exclusive homeware item. This one is also New Year's themed with so many cute snacks for the occasion. The homeware item for this month's box is one of my favorites because I love cute little functional items like the Sakuraco wagashi calendar. They're all shaped as like common Japanese sweets and have information about them on the back as well. Both boxes come with a 24-page cultural guide booklet, and it includes information regarding ingredients and allergens of each of the snacks, but also informs you of little tidbits revolving around culture and traditions in Japan, like learning about the New Year's feasts, spiritual cleansings, or about Hatsumode, which is the first shrine visit of the year. Each month has a different theme, meaning that you get to try out a whole new selection of new treats and snacks every month. For example, TokyoTreat's theme for the month of January is New Year snacking, while Sakuraco's box is Japan's New Year's traditions. It is once again time to try the tea from the Sakuraco box. This is the Shizuoka Genmaicha, which is a nice roasted brown rice tea with very low caffeine, which I kind of like for, perfect for doodling and just working alongside with a small little kick. And because there's a lot of sweets in these boxes, I feel like it pairs very well alongside with the snacks. So for the snacks, I do think that the mint chocolate is my very favorite Kit Kat from the TokyoTreat boxes. If you like mint chocolate, then this one's definitely for you. Also, I really like the Kinako mochi chocolates. They have like a really good texture in the center and they're very flavorful, which I really like. And then from the Sakuraco box, I really like the little Kampeito candy. I was actually kind of surprised that each individual colored little Kampeito actually have a different flavor. I'm used to having Kampeito that was like all the same flavor, but still like very colorful and very cute. So I actually really like these ones. Onto more of the savory or the salty side, I did like the seafood crackers. They're just very flavorful. I think they're a very classic kind of snack, and I think it's perfect for the new year. And a bonus, some of them are like little cute fishy shapes, which I think is very cute. So, if you would like to get a box for yourself or want to give these as a lovely gift to family or friends for the new year, then do check out the links in the description. Thank you again to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's talk about coloring eyes. Like this, just to give you a better idea how I typically like to work. I'm going to alpha lock this, and we're actually going to color directly on this layer and treat it kind of how I typically like to paint. This might look a little strange. And then I'll do one more set down here, probably. So this is just purely our sketch. And then I have this one where the color is kind of set down here. I'm going to change this to multiply really quick. And we are also going to change the color. So typically this is also merged entirely with the rest of my sketch. So I'm going to leave it at more of almost a light brown color. And then we're going to go back to our skin tone layer right here. I'm going to pop in a little bit of shading for eyes because I do this, like I said, kind of hand in hand for everything else. But because we're just focusing on the eyes, this isn't going to be that big of a deal. I don't know if I can explain it super well, but basically any color that you put underneath a multiply layer, as long as your multiply layer is like a mid to light tone color. You can also go dark, but I recommend not going super dark like pure black. Otherwise, you're not going to notice any color change, and don't go pure white. Otherwise, your lines will disappear. Well, let me do this. So under white, this is the actual color of what my multiply layer shows up as, but with color underneath, it will change appropriately to a certain degree. So because it's kind of like in this purpley brownish color, if I place like a blue, suddenly I get this color, which is now this versus this is how it's like actually showing up. So I like to take this to my advantage while I'm coloring, which is why I have my sketch set like this right now. White or off-white color for our sclera, or like the whites of our eyes. Now I do this in one layer. You can do it in several, whatever is most comfortable for you or whatever is most easiest for you. After that, I need some sort of shadow. I usually pick some sort of like mustier gray color, but the color temperature will depend kind of like environment or like overall color scheme. So for here, I'm gonna use kind of like a pale purple. And don't worry if you're a bit too messy around like the eye line area. If you want to, you can also not change this to multiply and make it like a dark color so that all of this mess kind of doesn't really show up. And now I kind of do eyes in two different ways. So sometimes I find it easier to start off with our kind of like mid-tone color or our darkest color. I'll do one on each eye, I guess, show you guys, and fill almost like our base color. And then we can also add in our lighter color towards the bottom. And I'm using a very soft brush for the most part. So if I use less pressure, it becomes a lot softer. If I press harder, it becomes more solid. Closer in value. And I'm also making just like a gradation. Or we can do the opposite. Start with one of our lighter colors. And then we can go back in with our darker color or mid-tone color to do the gradation from the top going down. I do find that placing the lighter color at the very bottom is a little bit easier to get a smoother gradation. So for the most part, they look relatively similar. Next thing I'm gonna do is also take a bit of a darker color, and I am pushing it towards like a cooler hue. I'm just gonna color around here near the top just to make it a little bit darker. We can adjust this a little bit more later with our sketch. And then this is when I kind of fill in our eyelid area as well. Now it might feel redundant filling this in, but because we have the multiply layer set, I like actually doing this. I feel like it appears a little bit softer. But because I will do overpainting later, we can adjust the colors a little bit more too. So a fairly dark color, and then we can choose a light color kind of for like the upper center, just to give a little bit more shine. At this point, I will also drop in kind of like a reflective color, a secondary color, whichever you like. For green eyes, I do like adding purple or pink to the top. Sometimes I add this only in the overpainting portion, but sometimes I know what color I want, so I don't really mind. Color that typically matches the dark color up here, but like I said, it depends on the character, depends on the vibe a little bit, as well as like whether or not the character has like a unique pupil shape. Sometimes I paint it at this point, other times I'll add it when I'm rendering, and then we can take our highlight color, which is our white. So this is kind of what the eyes look like at this point. So it's a little bit on the light side for some areas. So next thing I'm gonna do is alpha lock my sketch. And we're gonna choose some colors to better suit the eyes. Now sometimes I leave it completely warm because I want some of that skin tone to kind of peep through. Other times I will choose a very similar color so that everything's a little bit more uniform. Something that I might think is more skin tone color-ish, depending on the character, and we can kind of just add a little bit of that color back in. Okay, so next we're gonna go to rendering. So I'm gonna merge this to my color layer, like so, and then we're gonna switch brushes to my sharp render. And I really like darkening eyes up quite a bit to give a lot of contrast. And this is actually what I was talking about earlier, about Nouvelette or Flynn's, or characters who have really light eyes, which I'll show you in demonstration as well. I might speed it up, we'll see. where lighter eyes I do struggle a little bit more, or like eyes that are very blank looking, because I like adding contrast like this. So I'm focusing right now purely on the iris portion. So I like to darken up where I placed like that initial shadow part, and then I'm also going to darken our upper eyelid area right here. Kind of give it a clear indication, all monochromatic or just like one shade of color. So I'm gonna focus a lot of the dark in one area, and then as we reach the outside, I will switch colors and slowly start to kind of feather it out and soften it up a little bit more. Oftentimes for like a softer look, I will kind of bleed the skin tone into like the eye area. So some of that brown, so that it becomes a little bit softer. Now, another thing that I've really been enjoying more recently, and I've seen other artists do it, I think it's mostly just for aesthetic reasons, is that I almost do like a double outline around the iris. Now, I really like this for like traditional art for some reason. Feels like a double insulated thermal cup with 2 layers. So I like making the upper portion a little bit more darker so that it doesn't become too distracting. And then a little bit of the lighter color kind of peeking through and merging kind of with this doubled line wall portion. Then we can kind of take like this dark mid-tone-ish color that's like in between, and I do like end up adding a little bit more of like hatching, detailing to the eyes, whichever you like. And you can kind of pick up any of the colors as we move closer and closer to the lighter area so that it's not too jarring. We can also clean up our edges. Then I will also darken up the bottom lash line and kind of do the same thing, where as we approach the outside lines, I will eventually get lighter, and then if I can, kind of pull in more of that skin tone to warm it up so it can become very soft. Pupil, I can kind of go like either way. We can darken up the center quite a bit and kind of give it a bit of a gradation. We can also lighten up like the center portion a bit. Depends on what you like. Sometimes I make it a lot darker, just overall. Because sometimes I don't have like rhyme or reason why I add certain details. I add whatever looks the most suitable in my opinion. I did lose a little bit of that yellowiness in his eyes, so we can add it in subtly here. Sometimes for fun, to give a little bit extra almost oomph or glow to the highlights, you can add like a very bright color. I've seen people use yellow, kind of like this light blue that kind of surrounds the highlight a little bit. And if you want, you can definitely pull more colors from like the eyes or like any other colors that you want right into the center portion as well. So we kind of have our stages at this point. We have our sketch layer, and then we have coloring and just like color adjustments and shading, as well as highlights and just getting our rough colors down. And then after that, we have our fully rendered eye right here. So I'm gonna render this one off screen, and then we'll come back, and then I'll do one more set of eyes of my OC that has lighter eyes than Masaki, which kind of has like a very standard mid-tone color for the most part. And then we'll do one more that has like a different kind of gradient, and I think that might be it. Or maybe I'll do some other eyes for fun at the very end. So I'll be right back. Okay, so now that I'm back, I have finished up both of the eyes. You can kind of see that they're not like 100% kind of like symmetrical. I think it's because like sometimes I work back and forth. Other times I work on one eye, use the colors that I used on that eye onto the other eye so that I can try to keep them a little bit more consistent with one another. But I don't keep my eyes like super clean. Sometimes I do, but oftentimes you can kind of see the brush strokes, but because we're looking from afar, they look a little bit more cleaner at this point. So this is kind of like what the eyes are gonna look like. I'm gonna quickly sketch out Moriko's eyes, which is another one of my OCs, and she is gonna have lighter green eyes, and I'm gonna show you guys how I don't exactly darken this up to the point where it's gonna look out of place, I hope, because I do match almost like this upper portion, depending on the eye color, obviously, and like the eyelash-ish area color for the most part. So let me quickly sketch out Moriko's eyes, and then we can color hers next, and then we'll do kind of like one more, and then maybe do some fun ones, maybe based off of characters that have like very unique eye styles or eye shapes or something like that, or a style that doesn't really fit in this criteria per se. So just a bit of a rough base for Moriko, and then we can color her eyes kind of the same way. So I'm also going to set this to multiply as usual. Our colors a bit. I don't mind going a smidge darker because we can adjust it later. So I'm just going to preemptively alpha lock this portion. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add her sclera or her eye whites. Shadows I leave pretty simple since they're not like a super prominent part of the coloring. It's typically just like one shade. Don't know if I can even get her eye color correct. Let's start off with this. It's more of like an approximation. I don't mind if my colors are not super accurate because these are my OCs. And then for hers, I don't think I've really nailed what color I like to put at the very top portion, because if her eyes are super light. Kind of like similar to Masaki's, where his is more of like a pinkish purple color as well. So right now, it doesn't really look all that light compared to Masaki's right now because of my sketch color being super dark. But for her upper and lower lids, they are still dark. So we're gonna make this still somewhat dark compared to like the base color of her eyes. Darken our upper eyelid. A smidge of her lower lid. So I think this is what we're gonna go for. So right now, you can see Masaki has like a lot more contrast, even like within his eye compared to Moriko. Then we're just going to merge down. I'm gonna show you guys how I render this one, and then we'll go ahead and render this one off screen. So sometimes I don't really follow my own steps. I feel like as long as I get to the same place, I don't really mind. Still trying to make sure that her eye color in general is still on the lighter side. So I don't really want to get rid of that, just to stay more accurate to her character, because I do find that's kind of important, being able to adapt your coloring style to the character's eye color or eye shape or eye style to a certain degree. Be a little bit more flexible, and I feel like that's something I've been doing, at least attempting to do more recently, because it's kind of like the same thing. If I gave like more of a person who has sharper, more narrow eyes, and you gave every character shoujo looking eyes just because that's the only thing you want to draw or can draw, have a little bit of like flexibility, have a little bit of like variation, so that you don't lose like key features for certain characters. I haven't really decided too much whether or not Moriko is going to have just like lighter eye color in general, including the pupil, if I want it to keep it dark, and then the rest of her eyes are just fairly light. So you can kind of see like this color is going to be the darkest that I'm going to be putting into this area, so that I don't alter too much of like the overall value of her eye color for her iris. So I definitely think I kind of mindlessly do stuff until I kind of like where it's gonna end up. So that's why I don't feel like I have like a specific way. It definitely follows very much the same pattern throughout everything, but this is kind of what Moriko's rendered eye versus like a non-render eye. Okay, so here we have Moriko's finished eyes. I feel like they're still slightly like upturned a little bit too much, but you know, it's okay. I managed to fix it a smidge before you know what we had for the sketch. I did end up not darkening the top, and it does give it a more of like a lighter effect versus if I did this. It still reads as like a fairly light eye color, but I want it to read even lighter without needing that contrast. So you can tell me if you actually prefer this one versus this one. I feel like this is a little bit more like softer and subdued, which I prefer for Mariko's eyes versus something like this. Even though this still looks nice and it's still a lot lighter versus like what Masaki's eyes look like up here. Yeah, this is kind of just like the standard eyes that I like to do. So we're gonna do one more, which I already kind of had planned of my OC Selwyn. So we're gonna shrink him down a bit. We can kind of see it more appropriately placed on the entire face. Even though this is not gonna be like fully rendered for the rest of the surrounding areas, I already went ahead, sketched out where I wanted the eyes to be, so it gave me context for his hair. So I'm gonna sketch the eyes as normal. And typically if they're front facing or like, you know, their heads are tilted, but they're still like, you know, looking straight at you, I will just copy and paste the eye instead. Otherwise, yeah, you would have to draw the eye separately. But because I have the eyes already drawn separately, we're just gonna sketch them. So starting off, like I said, kind of with our kind of dark color. It's much too dark. So I'm taking advantage of like the softer brush that I can get from just pressing a little lighter. And then as we get lighter and lighter with the color, you can kind of pick and choose a little bit. Sometimes I go a lot more harder with the center color. Other times I'll just like follow the gradations for the most part. So his eye color doesn't look exactly the same of how I've drawn it here. So back to our sketch. I'm also going to merge down eyebrows, and I think that's kind of it for Selwyn's eyes. I'm going to merge it down and we can start to render this one as well, which shouldn't be too bad. Like I mentioned, it's not the exact same colors that I used for his eyes here. So other than consistency, I do just like to play around with like the colors, how much detail I end up putting into them. So I do feel like at times, I do end up making like eyes more detailed than they need to be. And then sometimes I really simplify them. But you can kind of see I kind of render one eye and then I will eventually go back to the other one. That's kind of what the eyes look like for the most part. I do end up like going back and forth, seeing if I want to adjust anything every time, which is like why I tend to hop around whenever I do rendering. But this is kind of how I like to draw eyes typically. I do think it's nice to preserve what it looks like to a certain degree. Selwyn a little bit more, so he looks a little bit more finished. Okay, so here's the voiceover written right here. I don't think I really talked about it, but I ended up finishing up Selwyn's little eyes or whatever that drawing was, and we're moving on to something that I would consider more like a kind of like a study or more like a comparison to see how my interpretation of drawing like a certain character's eye versus like their eyes in my style, if that makes sense. So I decided to pick out 2 characters. These ones are a little bit more like applicable to myself, so I ended up picking Danhong PT or Danhong Permancer Terre because I draw him quite a bit, and I feel like there's always like a little bit of inconsistency. I think it depends on whether or not I'm like doodling him versus drawing him for like an actual illustration. And then the second character we're going to be doing as well is going to be Nouvelette from Genshin Impact, because I've also drawn him kind of recently. And I feel like because I don't take like a super close look of his actual like model's eyes, I never fully understand or grasped the idea of his eyes. So I wanted to do a little, I guess like a study basically of his eyes, kind of like more up close. I just think it's kind of like a fun way to do an eye style study in a sense, just to see how much you can almost merge your style but still keep somewhat the integrity or the look of the original look of the eyes, if that makes sense. I've talked about this, I think, in the 6th fan art video, because this is going to be posted afterwards, even though I filmed this before, technically. I like to try my best to keep parts of, I guess, like characters, features, or their style kind of like intact to kind of keep them a little bit more recognizable instead of fully drawing them just completely how I would draw things very generically. Kind of like in a comparison idea, if I drew both Danhong and Nouvelette, who have very sharp looking eyes, similarly to how I draw Kaisen's eyes, who is my OC's, they won't look like themselves. I feel like certain parts do make up the character, so keeping some features are going to be somewhat important. Obviously, this is going to be stylized and more of like a preference towards yourself, as well as if you're doing commissions and stuff, maybe it's a preference of the commissioner. So it's just things to keep in mind. For me, I want to keep it a little bit closer if I can. So I don't know exactly how this is going to be edited, so how much I talked about it, but I ended up doing 2 examples of characters that I've drawn like recently. So one is obviously Danhong Permancer Terre, because he's one of my favorite characters to draw. So I decided to do his eyes because they are a little bit unique, where the center pupil is not like dark. It's just kind of like a yellowy goldenish color. Now I didn't follow too closely to like his model art, and a lot of his splash art is a little bit hard to see sometimes, so he might have like a white little circle or a band, but for the most part I followed very similar to like just the general format of his eyes, in terms of having the center pupil being yellow, having like a darker kind of like upper half, but I didn't go as dark, kind of similar to like Nouvelette, where literally the top half of the eye is like significantly darker, which I ended up doing here for, I guess, like my version of his eyes, which kind of like doesn't have a normal highlight. I'm pretty sure like in the past I would actually add an extra highlight or something like that, like maybe I would add it right here if I wanted to give extra light. Or I've seen a lot of people, including myself, I've done this as well, where you give like a little side highlight so it doesn't really like impede as much. But his pupil, or like the center of his eye, does have like a very light kind of like diamond shape in the very center, and it's very much like the highlight in his eyes pretty much. So I ended up doing something similar. So very much still like the same way how I color in general for eyes, but we're kind of like following a little bit more closely to our reference material. And I do think that if you struggle with either copying too much to a reference, like let's say you're drawing Nouvelette, you kind of want to keep him more in your style and you don't want to draw him exactly like the reference image, you can kind of do what I did here, where I would sketch and color with the reference open, but when it's time to clean up and render, I end up closing the reference and just focusing on my own work. Now I know this isn't going to work for everybody in terms of like the process, because I do end up kind of like putting more detail, pushing it further, and like actually finishing up the render. Afterwards, I've laid down majority of the groundwork, which some people might do if you do more of like a detailed sketch with color, and then maybe you'll work on line art and actual flats and coloring and rendering afterwards. That could be an option for you to do it right in between those two major steps. But it is something like I like to do in general. So like if I'm drawing a character and I'm not like too familiar with them, I would draw them like solely with the reference, and then later on maybe I'll draw it with the reference until I get to the part where I want to like finish up the sketch or finish up the drawing. I would close the reference image and just work on what I've already got so that I don't lean too closely into drawing exactly what I see for my reference image. So yeah, it's kind of like how I approach the eyes for these ones, where I don't default hopefully too much towards how I regularly draw eyes. I didn't end up doing any eyes that were more dramatically different. Let me show you guys an example. This is like a very simple version of what I'm talking about, where maybe if you're drawing something that's more towards like very big, like almost shoujo-esque eyes, I do draw their eyes a little bit bigger. They're not like significantly bigger, because I still draw them somewhat in my style. But in terms of like Waguri versus Rintaro, where his eyes are a little bit more like beadier, so you know, making sure that his iris is much smaller inside his already like a little bit more sharper eyes compared to like a character like Waguri, who has like very glassy, very shiny, larger eyes. And I've talked about this a little bit, where like if I pretend I primarily draw characters like this, then if I draw someone who has like bigger eyes and I gave his eyes to her, it will look very off and it won't really read as her. So I try my best to see if I can find a balance. Obviously there is going to be a bit of a struggle, but it's like something I would like to improve on as well. Oh, here's another one. Drawing like alien stage characters. Ivan's eyes fairly dark and not having like a very prominent highlight, or how I drew Mizi, and then making sure there's not like really a pupil or anything as prominently drawn. I don't like how I drew Till's eyes, but obviously he has like the sharper, more beadier eyes. I want to get better at drawing like characters that have that look, as well as like characters that have more like sharper, how to explain it? It's a little bit more towards like Ikemen rather than very cutesy, because I do lean towards cutesy more towards like this style, or how I draw Suwa, definitely. I forget his name. I think it's Hanako, right? So if I drew him in my normal style, it might not read as much like him, but with like context, I would probably get the gist that this is the character, but trying to keep it very similar to how like he actually looks like. And then kind of like on the opposite, where I drew Oikawa definitely just more towards my style. Like without context, I feel like it's very hard to tell that it's him if I do this. Like you probably can't tell it's him, but if I do this on Hanako, hopefully you can kind of tell that that's him. Here's some more. So very big shoujo eye. Psyche's very blank looking eyes. And then try my best to kind of merge between, I guess, the styles a little bit. Hyacinth's another one. She has like very bright and kind of like sparkly looking eyes, but I still added a lot of like the stuff that I like to do. So adding a little bit of extra color around to make the highlight softer, darkening up right at the very top as well. But that's basically how I draw eyes. I hope you guys don't mind kind of more like this casual style of like how I'm showing you guys how I typically like to color things like this. But I think that's it for today. I don't know when exactly this video is going to be going up, but hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!